My name is Rafael Dohms. I am a principal engineer / architect at SurveyMonkey. I've been with them for 4 years, but I've actually been in the company for 8 because they acquired the previous company I was working for, which I'll tell you a little bit about. Why is that relevant? So, most of you who know me for a long time, you know that I used to work at Usabilla. There was a little company called Usabilla, and I worked for that company as starting with a tech lead, which was one of those flavors in there, and eventually as a principal engineer, or as a staff, and then a principal, and so forth. And then along came a company called SurveyMonkey, which bought Usabilla, renamed it to get feedback, and there I was, okay, it's a big enough product, it's a nice area of the company, it was focused on slightly different stuff than SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey is really focused on self-service surveys. Usabilla was focused on customer feedback. So at that moment, I had a choice. I could stay focused on that product, or I could go poke around SurveyMonkey and see what else was in there. Now, this was a company that I saw grow up. I've been there since 2016. I helped set the culture of the team. I knew what the engineers were doing. It was PHP. It was really high bar PHP. I was really proud of what we were doing. SurveyMonkey has 25 years history, Python, Java, ASP, lots of really nice technologies. And I was like, I could just ignore that and stay within that island. But I chose to do something, which is, okay, you know what? I want to know what's happening over there. I want to understand what the problems of a company the size of SurveyMonkey. Usabilla was 30 to 60 engineers. SurveyMonkey was 300 to 400 engineers. I wanted to understand what happened there. Are the same lessons I learned from Usabilla applicable there? So I went poking around. Turns out it was a good choice because they pulled the plug on Get Feedback. Layoffs, macroeconomics, you all heard it, right? So that product was gone, and thankfully, I was established enough within SurveyMonkey that my role was relevant, and they decided, you can stay. And I was like, great, I got a job. I love it. So the moral of the story, don't put yourself in a box. That box might not, actually, no, that's not the moral. The moral is, define your own box. You will see me talk about this for the whole talk. Proactivity is going to be a trait of that individual contributor path. Figuring out what's next for you, what you can do, how you can have an impact in the company is going to be absolutely important for you. Now, to give you a little bit more context into that, just so we can settle some scores, I went from all over the place. I've been individual contributor path. I did spend some time as a manager, so I have managerial experience. And somewhere in the middle, I had this weird mix, which is being a staff and a principal engineer with people reporting to me, which is kind of a mix between both worlds. You're kind of like a manager, but you're managing, and in this case, I was managing staff engineers and principal engineers, so they don't need that much managing. They need more telling them where to help in the company, right? So it's a little bit more of leading than managing. And that's relevant as you see the different flavors of what we're talking about here. Because what I want to do here is I want to teach you how to succeed as an individual contributor. I want to hope to get all of you enough ideas to succeed within your company with that role and see what we can do with that. Now, here's the bad thing. The bad thing about a staff plus engineer role, it is very poorly defined. There is no industry standard, as we're saying. Like, there's lots of opinions, there's lots of different shapes, but there's no one thing where you say, this is what a staff engineer is. If you go to people's career framework, it'll change wildly. So it's a little bit hard for you to figure out what is it that I should be focusing on, how should I behave within this company. On the other hand, there's something very good about this, is the fact that the staff engineer role is not very clearly defined. Now, can anyone tell me what that means? Exactly, freedom. You can choose what you're going to do. At the end of the day, what's important is the impact that you're going to have in that company, right? You want to make sure you're having a positive impact. You're getting your engineers, you're getting the company, the business to the right spot. So you can do a lot with shaping that. And part of the understanding here is what is the difference then between a staff engineer and a senior engineer? What sets these two apart? Like, what's the difference there? Now, one of the analogies I've heard in the past from one of my bosses that I really enjoy is you take a project, a failing project. Right? Project is not moving forward, they're not delivering, they're missing the dates, and you go, okay, well, there's not enough leadership here, we need more people to pull it together, and you put a senior engineer in that project. Cool, senior engineer goes in, and the moment you take them out, the project goes wrong again. So the project was going well with them in there, but the moment you take them out, it doesn't go so well again. Okay, right. So if you take a staff engineer and you put them in a fitting project, when you take them out, that project will keep going, or it should keep going. Now, why is that? What's the difference here? And what I've come to see is that there's a difference between how the staff engineer operates and the senior engineer operates, is that the staff engineer is there to help the rest of the engineers in that team grow up, learn more. At the end, when the staff engineer leaves, the team has leveled up, so they're able to take and continue that trend, whereas the senior engineer is coming in to solve the problem, right? You come in, you have a hammer, you see a bunch of nails, you knock them down. As a staff engineer, you got to do some of that as well. That's part of the role. But you're also trying to figure out, okay, who's going to be me when I leave this project? Who can carry this on? If anyone here has been a fan of Amsterdam PHP, you know, it's kind of like what we have. How do we make sure that new leadership can come in and a user group can outgrow its leader? Same thing with a team. You want to make sure that that team has space to carry on. And yes, thank you, Free, for organizing Amsterdam PHP. So, that's the difference between these two. Now, in order to look at the role of a staff engineer, let me not look yellow, I believe there's 3 pillars, and this is not my idea. This comes from a book by Tanya O'Reilly called The Staff Engineer's Path. Anyone read that book? You? Good. You will see lots of familiar lessons. It is an amazing book. I highly recommend it. I have the links at the end. My slides will be shared out as well. I highly recommend it. So she describes these 3 pillars, which I found amazing because they really caught the essence of what I felt like in that role and gave me something to strive for. First one is big picture thinking. As a staff engineer, a staff plus, right? You really need to have that vision of the company as a whole. You cannot be bound by your team, you cannot be bound by an org. You have to understand what that big picture is and how you're going to influence, how you're going to leverage it. Second part is execution. Again, it's a technical role, so we expect you to be in there solving problems. So how do we get projects moving? How do we keep them moving? How do we find the right projects and so forth? How do we get good at executing? And finally, and this is my favorite, and I think one of the most important, is leveling up the teams around you. Like I said, that's the difference, right? And yes, I'm going to tell you something that not everyone's going to like to hear. It's all about the people. And it is all about the people. It's not just code, right? So I really believe like these 3 are really interesting areas. And you might be thinking, oh, okay, great, I got to be an extrovert. I got to, no, don't worry. What is cool about this is that this actually doesn't describe one single person. It describes a bunch of different roles that you can take. There's different archetypes to what a staff engineer, a principal engineer can be. Now, you may be, for example, a tech lead. You may be a tech lead. Someone really focused on working together with a manager and a specific team and making sure that team keeps going and looking at those projects and then, just moving blockers and getting stuff done. Like you're the right hand of a manager, maybe. Or you might be more of an architect type, looking at that big quality picture or the big vision of the architecture, where things are going, how they're going. You might actually just be a solver, someone who can put in a project and they'll solve problems. They'll just come in there and find solutions and get us to the next step and move on. But they'll do it one project at a time. Or you might operate as a right hand to a director or a VP. And the idea here is you'll be able to give that VP more visibility and more bandwidth so they can operate and control more areas of the business, especially relevant in big companies, and you'll be helping them, I'll take this part of the org, they'll have another principal engineer take that part, and together the 3 of you can cover a lot more of the company. So being a right hand is also a very interesting and challenging position because it really puts you on the tough projects, and it's one of those where you report a little bit higher. And even further, if we look at these archetypes, it already describes completely different people, but each of these require a completely different set of skills. And you are going to have to rely on your tech skills, your product management, your project management, and yes, the always feared people management skills. Oh, but you told me that we're not managers. Well, yeah, being a manager and managing people, working with people is a big part of the stuff. If you joined engineering and computing in general because you were trying to avoid the people, sorry, we're right back there. It's just the reality. The biggest problems you're going to solve are not going to be the code. They are going to be working together with more people. They are going to be getting everyone on the same page and moving forward. That's just the reality. And you can do that being an introvert, you can do that being an extrovert. You need to find what you're good at and what the people around you are looking for. Because right now, when you're there, you're a staff engineer, you've now gotten that promotion, you're it. Your manager is going to have less and less of a role in your career. You are going to be the one leading. You're now responsible for the success of the company, of your team, and even the success of your manager. And it is often said that a good staff plus engineer actually makes their manager look good, right? Because they're just doing so much work and covering so much that the manager now has more breadth to be able to manage everything around it. And that can change a lot depending on how the structure of your company is. So you might be, for example, reporting high. And if you're reporting high, you're going to have lots of really interesting challenges. You're reporting to a VP or directly to the CTO. You're going to have bigger challenges. Whatever you do is going to have a bigger risk attached to it, and it's going to have bigger impact. So hopefully that also means higher reward. You're going to find that balance. You're going to get more visibility, always good. But at the same time, you're going to have less manager time. Now, the thing is here, usually when you get here, your manager, whether it's high or low, they chose the manager path. They did not choose the individual contributor path. So at some point, they're going to lose the ability to really help you too much. They're still going to give you lots of good advice, but they might lose the possibility of giving you really good advice, unless you get lucky. Because there's often a position where people go from being a principal or an architect into being a VP or a CTO. And which is the case. I have a manager who's he's done the whole architecture gig, and he's now a VP, and he brings that really interesting mix of the technical and the management level, and I've been learning a lot from that, so I'm really thankful for that. If you get lucky, if you got one of those, use that opportunity, because the growth is going to be there. But that's not always what you're going to get. And you're going to get a lot less hand-holding. It's going to go, hey, there's a fire over there. Okay, yeah, and you just run off and you go figure out what that is, right? And you can come back with questions and all that, but usually it's going to be kind of like that. You're going to get some random ideas and you're going to go figure those out. However, if you're reporting low, a line engineer, senior engineer, a line manager or a senior manager, you're going to be lower down. So, it's like the higher up you are in the mountain, the more you see of the lands. You're going to be lower down, so you're going to see a lot less. You're going to be focused on more singular focus projects within that team, within that org. You're going to have a lot more manager time, though, because at this level, you haven't diverted paths enough to be too far different. So you can change a lot of information there. At the same time, you're going to have less impact, so it's going to be harder for you to have this impact that goes across the org, which is the number one thing that everyone complains in every single career framework. Framework says, I need to have more impact. Manager does not allow me to work on projects that have more impact. How do I balance those two out, right? But you're going to have a manager who maybe can help you a little bit more in that aspect, because those paths haven't diverted anymore, right? And you're going to have more manager time, because the higher your manager is, the less time they have, because that's just what happens, more meetings, more useless meetings. The lower they are, the better. Cool. Everyone with me? All right, so let's go into those three pillars, and let's talk about the opportunities that you have in those three pillars and how we can actually do something with that. First, building that big picture. Now, do we really need someone focused on that big picture? Is that really that important? I think it is. If you look at a general company, you'll look like this, right? All companies are shaped like this. We know this, right? Yeah, cool. You find a bunch of teams in different domains, and they're all working together, right? And everyone's working on their little piece, and everyone is communicating. No, they're not. No one talks to each other. They're all working in isolation. Everyone's solving the same problem 50 different times. What's going to happen is that one team is going to have a problem, and they'll find a solution for their problem. Now, within that scope, that is the perfect solution. That is exactly what they need. However, if you look a little bit outside, you'll find that that other team over there, that other team over there we go. That other team over there, if we choose that solution, it's actually impossible for them. It's going to stop what they're doing. It's going to be inviable. Or they'll only find that out 3 years later when they actually try to integrate the systems, and then it's too late. But if you're looking broadly, if you're looking across the boundaries of the teams, if you have that big picture, if you're trying to figure it out, you might find out that if you take that idea and change it slightly, you now have a solution that can change and can work for a lot more teams. And Tanya puts this really interesting in the book. She says the local maximum the best decision for a specific group might be very different from the best solution when you take the entire picture in mind. Now, okay, so that means I gotta take the entire company for every decision I'm making? No, don't worry. We can operate autonomously. We want to do that. We want teams to be able to move forward with their own pace. But you need to have someone who has an eye on what's going on. Maybe they'll find something that the other team already did, and you don't need to do again. How many of you have duplicated code within your companies? Right? I mean, we've all seen this. Two teams working in isolation, building the exact same thing in completely different ways, because why not? And completely incompatible with each other. So even when you try to merge them in, you can't, right? So this is where it's really important. You're going to be operating in between these teams. This is your domain, the entire company. You want to keep an eye on that. You want to figure out what's going on. You want to stretch your conscience to as far as it can go. And that's going to be a challenge because you need to balance your time between being able to look at that whole picture and get your work done. That's going to stress you out at the beginning. I guarantee you, I suffered from this until the point where I told people, okay, get me out of this team because I cannot answer all the questions and deliver these tickets. Right? And I was thankful that my boss back then recognized what it was. Okay, we're going to make you an architect. I was like, what does that mean? I don't know. Cool. At least I didn't have tickets to handle, so I could spend most of the time mentoring and helping the teams get where they needed to go. But shouldn't managers align people? Yeah, managers should align people, right? Managers should be talking to other managers. How many managers in the group? How often do you talk to other managers? Always. Yeah, you can't put all that pressure on one person, right? So you got to spread that out. And at the end of the day, guess what? You're a lead. You're not a manager. I'm not gonna trigger you. You're a leader. But that's true. You are a leader. You're someone that people are looking up to, right? So you are a leader within that organization. You're expected, and someone put it this way, you're expected to be the grown-up in the room, which was one of the scariest things I heard. I was like, me? Grown-up? Jeez. Okay, cool. So, you need to have a role in that. You're partnering up with your manager. Your manager is no longer the person telling you exactly what to do. Your manager might need you to tell them what you think needs to be done. And that is the key. If you learn that early and realize, oh shit, I can influence this, I can define where we're going, I can help, you're going to have a lot more success if you don't embrace that. Now, this makes it hard because as a manager, you can usually go up to a team and say, you, do it this way. And they go, oh, the boss said, so I'll do it. Now, if you're a staff engineer and you go, hey, do it like this, they go, no. And you're like, oh, damn it, what do you do now? Now, I like to think of this as Staff Plus, they're like vampires. They cannot enter your house unless you invite them, right? You need to invite them in, and then, so if I'm trying to help another team, and the first thing I do when I enter when I come up to the team and I say, hey, your work is shit, they'll slam the door in my face. And they'll never call me into that meeting again. Now, how am I going to influence their good decisions if I can't even see the conversation, right? So you have to create a relationship with the other teams where people want you there. Oh yeah, no, let's call in Rafael. He has really good ideas. I don't, but suppose. Let him come in here. He has some technical vision, or he knows this part of the system, or God forsake, he knows legacy. Yay! But you want that. You want to have an impact every time you come in that is positive, so people will keep you coming back. And then, this is the transition, is when you stop having to run after the information, which is tiring as hell, and the information starts coming to you. And that makes your quality of life a lot better. I can guarantee you that. Cool. So where do you start? The first thing you need to understand is you need to pick your adventure. What are you going to do? What is going to be your signature? Which one of those archetypes are you going to go? How do you do that? Where are you in this company? What is this company, right? And going back to that book, Tanya describes 3 maps that you should have as you're trying to pick your adventure. First one is a locator map, right? This is the famous "you are here" map. So you know that you're right there, you know that over there is the sales team, you know that down here is the system for ticketing, down here is the account management, and you understand where you are and all that, how they connect, there's a bridge over there. Okay, cool. That's the first thing you need to know, because if you're going to look around, you need to figure out what you're looking around at. Second one, they call a topographical map. Now, this is the map of the qualities of where things are. Over there, that's the dependency rapids. Over there is the grumpy people who don't talk to you. Some people call them infra. I don't know. Over there is a team that hates collaborating with everyone else. Or over there, you've got all of the dark forest of legacy. Understanding these areas and their qualities will help you navigate. If you know there's a team that has a hard time working with other teams, you gotta change your approach. If you know that over there is a team that's used to working in silos, how do I break that silo? If I know that over there everything is written in Kotlin, okay, how do I help them with Kotlin? So understanding that topographical map will tell you, how you get to these areas, how you have an impact in these areas. And then finally, you got the treasure map, right? And that is going to look a lot like a project. How do we get from point A to the treasure chest at the end of the path? How are we going to navigate all of these little differences that we found? How are we going to get that silo team back in? How are we going to do all these things, right? So as you build these maps, it will get you a lot of understanding of what's going on in the company. What are the trouble areas? What are the good areas? And will help you figure out where you can have an impact, which is going to be very important to you because you want to have a good impact. But, and I can guarantee you this from day one, everyone here will have one big challenge. It's called communication. Guarantee you. Doesn't matter what size your company is, doesn't matter if it's in the Netherlands, if it's in Brazil, if it's in the US, communication is going to be your biggest problem every single time. Communication is one of the hardest things we can do. If we told everyone, hey, focus on communication, not coding, maybe we'll get somewhere, but I'm pretty sure we'll still have problems. So how do we get across this problem, right? So there's lots of strategies that I've used in the past that I found really interesting to help create that layer of communication. How do we get managers talking to managers? How do we get staff engineers talking to other staff engineers? How do we get engineers just talking? Usually is a good idea. So one of the things I found is open communication. How many of you have a private team channel on Slack? Right. So that other staff engineer and the other team that's trying to figure out what your team is doing, how do they find out? They don't, right? One of the biggest problems with the shift to remote that we have today is that my ability to walk around the office and overhear the crap that you're doing has become zero, right? I used to be able to just walk around and go, did you say you're not writing tests? No, come here, right? And be able to help that team. But now I can do that because everything is off in private channels. Why is it private channels? Why is it that we have this relationship with this lack of trust across teams? What's going to happen? Do you think they're going to come in and make fun of your code, scream at your team, whatever? Why do we feel this uncomfortable? If you create open channels, you create that opportunity of serendipity, of someone accidentally walking into your channel, reading something and saying, oh my God, I have done that. I did that in my previous company, or I saw Pim talking about in the conference yesterday. Those moments that you don't plan for can only happen with open communication. So reconsider those private team channels. What if they were public? What if we create trust across the teams? What if we talk about these problems? Second one is creating cross-skill and cross-org teams. Now, this comes in various shapes. It can be the guilds, the front-end guild, the back-end guild, or the chapter, front-end chapter, whatever Spotify model describes nowadays, agile squads, whatever the hype word is. Or it can just be, a tiger team, something that just gets people together to solve a problem. Creating more of these allows you to have these moments where different engineers from different areas can come together and learn from each other and understand what's going on. And then finally, paving the elephant paths. Does everyone know what an elephant path is? Right? The concept of an elephant path is when you look at a park, and that park has a bunch of little walkways, and then there's like grass, and then there's that one path in the middle of the grass, which is where everyone actually walks, right? That's what they call elephant paths. It's the path that people actually take, which we didn't expect. So if you understand those paths, where are people having the discussions? How are they having the discussions? And make those the right places. That's where you get your processes. That's how you get your inspiration. then you're making that communication more effective. And the one thing that every engineer has trouble with, and I can relate because it's boring, is you need to care about the business. Now, I don't mean that you need to think that your company is great and your boss is amazing and our logo is great. If you want to hear stories about logos, come talk to me afterwards. But understanding where your company is at. What does it mean where your company is at? Is your company in a startup mode? Is it in scale-up mode? Does it have loads of money? Is it cost-cutting? Who's not cost-cutting right now? How do you take that as information and leverage to what you're doing? How do you plan for all these things? Right? How do I, if my company is cost-cutting, then maybe upping a new open search cluster with all of our data, not the best idea. Maybe we can make do with that database. Right? We talked about trade-offs in Pim's talk as well. Making trade-offs. How do you make trade-offs if you don't understand the business side of things? Often as engineers, we ignore the business side, and then the company goes broke, and we're like, why did the company go broke? Well, because we were trying to make the perfect system. We were focusing on all the D's of DDD, and we forgot about the C of customer, right? So keep that business in mind. Another way that you can lead the company is through vision and strategy. Creating a vision for how we build architecture, how we collaborate, creating that vision. And the first part you need to know is identifying and understanding the values of your company. Because if your company values explicit over implicit, and you come up with a bunch of implicit stuff, it's not going to go well, right? So understanding your company's value is really important. And if you don't know what the values of your company are, and you ask around and no one does, time to find out. I did this exercise with Usabilla and with SurveyMonkey later, where we just put everyone together in a room. Usabilla was easy. We had 30 engineers. And we put up Post-its and get, okay, tell me your values. Do it like Agile Manifesto. I prefer explicit over implicit. I prefer Git over SVN. All of these things. What are your values? How do you prefer to build things? I prefer microsystems over monoliths. I prefer spaces over tabs. Whatever. Get all those values out there, look at them, consolidate them, and try to understand what is it that drives your engineers. Because once you create that culture, when you're hiring, when more people come into the team, that is the culture that people are going to be stepping in, and you need to make that culture live on its own. Otherwise, it will die. So you need to feed that, and you need to understand those core elements. So think about those. And if you're trying to create that vision and strategy, there's another book by Will Larson called Staff Engineer Beyond Management, something like that. There's a link at the end. And he describes his process to create vision, right? So you take 5 design documents, how you design a feature, blah, blah, and then you look at those 5. But as you're writing those 5, he says, well, you're gonna have issues when you're writing those 5, because you're gonna have a bunch of ideas of your own, like how you think things should be, right? Everyone has insane ideas. I do things better than everyone else. Does everyone do things better than everyone else? Like, yeah, come on, I can build that better than you can. Oh, obviously. So I have these great ideas, and he says, okay, take those great ideas that you just had and write them up in a document. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's what I need. Write them up in a document. Great, now you have a document of all your great ideas. Yeah, and then stick it in the trash. Because you need to get these things out of your system. Your ideas are great. I'm not telling you to ignore them. But if you write all of these 5 things with only your ideas, you're not getting anywhere. So toss those out, get it out of your system, tell everyone your great ideas, and then go write those with your team. Go write 5 of them. Summarize them, and you'll have engineering strategy. Right? This is how we solve problems in this company. That's your strategy. Then you take 5 of those strategies, put them together, and project them 2 years in the future. What's the effect of this strategy that we're doing now? We're going data-driven, we're going DDD, whatever. What's that effect in 2 years? And that's your vision. That's where you want to be. Now, okay, this sounds like a lot of work, and what the hell is a strategy? What's a vision? I don't know, maybe you don't care. Not every company needs this. If you're small, whatever. If you're big, maybe that's the only way to manage them. But whatever. The important thing here is to avoid the echo chamber. The important thing here is for you to bring as many people. That's why they say 5, right? It's bring as many people as you can into the room. People from infra, people from engineering, people from product. Make sure you're talking to a lot of people to get these things in. Cool. So let's go to execution. Time check, I'm late. All right. First thing you're going to know, and this is ironic, is that your time is limited, much like the time I have to finish this talk. So how are you going to choose? How are you going to pick the right projects to work on? How are you going to manage your time? Managing your time is hard. Managing your time is something that you're going to have to do wherever you are, even more so the higher up you go. So hyper-focus, to-do lists, getting things done, read all those books, figure out which one works for you, for your personal ideas. But more importantly, when you're thinking about the company, think about the projects and how you're going to choose them. How do I pick where in this company I can have more impact? One of the narratives I heard about this, which I found really interesting, is the idea of looking at this from impact and effort, right? More impact, more effort, and trying to put things in a quadrant. Now, what you find is down here in the less effort and less impact stuff, this is stuff that you can get done really quick, but it won't really make a difference, is what we call snacking. Right? It's going to make you feel absolutely great about yourself. It's going to mean absolutely nothing to the company in the long run, right? So they say, hey, avoid snacking. It's good, it makes you feel good, and maybe you want to do it for a hackathon or something, but if you're spending too much time in here, you're not spending time where you need to be. There's a second layer down here, it's called preening, which is only doing the stuff that has high visibility so you get praise. It's also really good for the ego. Not really good for the company. So keep that in mind. Over on that side, we've got chasing ghosts. First thing that happens when you join a company, I'm going to sense this coming out of everyone's head. First thing that happens when you join a company is you go, I know what the problem is. We need to do that thing we did at the other company. Oh no, I've seen this problem. We need to do this thing that we did in the other company, right? We chase those ghosts of the problems we had in other companies or the benefits we had in other companies, and we try to fix the same problems over here without even validating if it is a problem. That's why they call it chasing ghosts, right? It sounds like they're there, but they're not really there. So think about that. You also don't want to be down here chasing ghosts. You want to be is up there, impact. Impact is your KPI, right? Impact is what's going to drive you. So what we usually have up here is what we call the existential issues. This is the big problem the company needs to solve. And what happens when there's a big problem that everyone knows the problem is there? Any ideas? Some people completely ignore it. That's one way of doing it. The other case you get is that everyone is on that problem. Now you've got every single principal engineer in your company looking at the same problem, and when you have too many chefs in the kitchen, you know what happens, right? You can't cook because no one agrees with each other. So it's great. Going to existential issues, you're going to have huge impact. It's the biggest problem the company is looking at, but maybe you just don't have the space to be in there. Right? So that's something to keep in mind. When you're finding those issues, is there enough space for you in there? Can you actually make a difference? Or are you just going to be one more? Or are you going to come in late and go, have we thought about this? And then we go back 2 months in the discussion because you said something that no one had said or had something that someone already said, and now you've derailed the entire project. So finding that space is good. Also, finding the attention. If you're just doing something and no one's paying attention to it, maybe there's no value to it, even though it has a high impact, like sometimes local development. Improving the experience of developing locally is huge. And you can go to a company where that is going to make a difference. And you can go to a company where you can do that, it's going to have a high impact, but no one's going to care. Because it just makes no difference. It's not in their values. Remember, we talked about values. And the most important thing, and if you really want to nail this, look at yourself and figure out which of these problems you can solve. Only you can solve. What is that unique thing about you? What is it that you bring to the game? Are you like Rafael, who talks a lot? Is that your game? Then where do you need to talk? Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I get kicked out of the room. But every one of you has a skill. Everyone else has a pit of knowledge they know. You know, you're a T-shaped. What is your T? What is that depth that you have? Find those problems and go help solve them. And again, don't ask for your manager to figure it out. Just go tell him, I'm going to go solve this, and here's the impact I'm going to have. Here's why we need to do it. But if any of you know me personally, life gets in the way. Sometimes life gets completely crazy. You're going through different times. So you also have to look a little bit like, RPG games. You can invest that many points in a couple of things. You might have a project that requires a lot of energy, but your personal life is in shambles. You're not going to have energy. So don't pick that project. Find the other one. Or maybe it changes, and this thing is going to give you a lot of social capital because you're actually going to be able to then get the credits to go change something else in the company. Cool, work on that. But find that right mix. What is it that you have to offer right now, and what is it that you can bring to the game, and what is it that you need from the company? Find this balance. And remember that execution does not mean coding necessarily. We're all here because we're technical, we love being technical. You're always going to run up to the people stuff. I mean, that's just a given. So remember, it's not always about coding. Sometimes it's just about leading a project, just making sure that everyone is looking in the same direction. And leading projects is really interesting because it takes two flavors. You can either, be the spotlight, be the one doing everything, everyone recognizes you for what you're doing, it's great. It's a great moment for you to advance your career. But at some point, being the guy behind the curtain, shining a light on a colleague that needs to make the leap from senior to staff or so forth, it'll give you a lot more pressure, and it'll get that person where they need to go. And the secret here is if you have a good manager, which most of you probably do, they're going to recognize that. Even though you're not getting the spotlight from the rest of the company, they're going to recognize what you're doing, behind the scenes. You're the little, puppet master there. That gets recognized by the right people because they're looking at your impact. They understand what you're doing. Cool. So finally, we can then segue into leveling up, and I managed to catch up with myself. That's great. Now, I have to break the news to you. You are now a role model. Welcome. It's the base understanding of every single team out there. A manager can tell you anything. They can say that we always do testing. They can say that we do DDD, that our code needs to be clean, and you can have a document on Confluence that states all of that, a little paper, a little post-it somewhere reminding you. If the most senior engineer in that team ignores the tests, writes crappy code, everyone else is going to mimic that behavior. If you are the most senior person in a team, it is your duty. Oh, that sounded really important. It is really important for you to lead by example. I cannot emphasize how much that makes a difference. If you are up there and you're comfortable enough to show them the vulnerabilities that you have, to go up there and say, hey, I have imposter syndrome, that's going to put everyone at ease. They're going to be able to go, oh shit, I don't have to be perfect all the time. If you're going up there and you can show them, hey, I made a mistake, I own up to it, that's going to make a difference to them. All of these things are really going to make differences because you need to be competent, responsible, and you need to be a good leader. Right? So that goes through having the knowledge. Yeah, we all need to be technical. You need to know about these things. You don't need to know about everything. You need to find the areas where you are, and you need to find the people who know the rest of the information that you don't have. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable person, but you need to know when to get the right people in the room. And you need to know when to use yourself. Same thing with the company. Understanding that business, the domain knowledge of the company is going to be really important. Owning up to your mistakes has such a huge impact. The worst thing a junior engineer can do is not break production. It's not tell people that they broke production. Breaking production should be the first or second step of every junior engineer in this industry because it will teach you more than 5 years of doing everything perfectly. I have deleted a database in production. Twice. Once. Twice, yeah. It took me a while to learn. But that gave me a lot more knowledge about that. And I started being careful. I started thinking, okay, how do we avoid these mistakes? How do we not repeat them? I then repeated it, but it's okay. I was young. But that set me free. I feel confident today that I can mess up, but we have backups. We have the right people in ops. I don't have access to any servers anymore. All the important lessons out of this. And the other thing that you can do as a senior engineer that has absolute impact, and the other thing that you can do as a speaker at a conference, is admit when you don't know something. The one thing I hate the most about a conference is someone asks a really complex question, and you can see the speaker has no idea what the answer is, and they come up with something that just sounds completely odd, but they don't simply stop and say, you know what? I don't know. I would love to figure it out. Come talk to me after the talk. Let's go figure it out and explore. Having that ability to do that in front of your team and say, I don't know what the answer is. Let's go find out. People will mimic that behavior. So instead of making shit up on the go, they're going to go look for the right stuff. So keep that in mind. Stepping up, making decisions, that's also something you can do that makes a huge difference to projects. We get stuck in these discussions. It goes nowhere. And you go, you know what? We're picking tabs. Well, we don't pick tabs, but pick something and then move on, right? Just get it done. Remembering where the goal is, and most of all, remember the people. People are coming to work because they need money, not because they like your presence. They're there to make money, and hopefully you're a really good teammate, and that makes their life better. So remember the people around you. How can you make their life better, as well as benefiting the company and everything else going on around you? Hold people accountable, but start with yourself. Something went wrong, own up to it. Something needs to happen, tell them. Don't hide the information. Maybe don't tell them, hey, tomorrow we're going to have a big layoff, you're all screwed. That could stress people out. But what can we do to break that information? Now, there's one strategy here that I learned from one of my managers. It's called Nimawashi. Anyone familiar with it? The idea of Nimawashi, it's a Japanese term for something. I can't remember what it is. But what it does is, again, I don't know. It's the idea that before having that big meeting where you're going to share that big thing, you leak it. You tell one guy, and you tell someone else, and then you tell them over there. And you just tell them about, more or less what's coming. You don't give the full picture, but you leak out a little bit of information everywhere. By the time everyone gets to that big meeting, everyone already knows what's going to happen. And they feel more comfortable and relaxed to get there. And I'm over time again. The other thing, empower individual contributors. The rising tide lifts all boats. One of the things we did at SurveyMonkey was create a guild for staff engineers. I got all the staff engineers in a group, all the staff plus, so together with the principals, and we read through this book that I'm mentioning, and we went through this talk, and we went through this advice, and we've been talking about our practice, and I've been telling them, hey, here's how you can step up your game. I need all of you to be my eyes in this company and to be your own eyes in this company. And I kind of set them free. If your manager says, don't ask your manager. Start first and then go figure out if you can still go on that way. So I gave them the freedom to explore. Also, now that we're back at having conferences, you are a bridge between your company and the conference. You're bringing knowledge back. You're taking knowledge to the industry. You're bringing it back from the industry. So leverage that. It's really, really important. And leverage the tiers of influence, right? You can have influence across a team in various levels. You can first have influence on an individual, mentoring, working with that individual. You can have influence on a larger group, maybe through a guild, maybe through a presentation, maybe through training. Or, and this is my favorite tier, it's the catalyst tier, where you're actually changing the culture. And that culture will now continue indirectly from you having to push it because you're teaching more people about that and they're taking that and going to the other teams, and it spreads like a wildfire, but a good wildfire. That's what you want, right? And you can leverage tools like advice, teaching, mentoring, training, setting guardrails, processes, checks, CI/CD, right, that kind of stuff, and opportunities. And I'll go this over really quick, but in the book, there's a table that shows some of these things and how you can have that different impact according to the level. So for example, you think about advice on a catalyst level, you're creating a mentorship program as opposed to just mentoring one person or another, right? Instead of just doing an event, you're creating a structure that's going to help people. And guilds can have a really good impact on that. Guilds can also help with creating the standard for linting and the standard for guardrails, right? Or chapters, whatever you want to call them. But also in that culture of not everyone taking credit for what they do and actually sharing the benefit across everyone. A tech radar, for example, is a great tool to create guardrails on a catalyst level. How do we introduce new technologies into our company and so forth? But what I find really important is this one right here, right? Behind the curtain work and empowering teams. Because the most important thing that I want you to leave here with is you need to know when to hand off the reins to someone else, when to give them credit, when to sacrifice your own ego and let someone else take that credit. Let someone else benefit from that. Like I said before, I guarantee you your managers will see exactly what you're doing. And they're the ones who are going to tell you if you're going to be promoted or not. So good. But your peers, they're going to go, you know what? That guy worked with Rafael, and he got credit, and he got up in his career. Maybe if I work with Rafael, I'll get the same. And then, you become the friendly vampire, which you'll never believe how hard it is to get AI to generate a friendly vampire. I can tell you a story. So, great. What I want here is, I want you all to design your future and take role. If you think you're going into management, go. There's fun, there's good stuff in there. If management's not for you, you can have an impact as an individual contributor. Take that path. Walk down that path and figure out what you can do. If you love this, if you think the ideas are great, these are the 2 books. I'll send the slides out from my Twitter and my Mastodon at the end here, or you can scan the codes if you're really quick. But I highly recommend these 2 books as learning material for this. And I'll leave that up there, and I'll thank you. Nailed